The first thing I heard when I stepped into the ballroom was laughter that stopped half a second too late. Not because I was late, but because I was early enough to be noticed before I could disappear into a corner. Crystal glasses clinked. A string quartet carried on like nothing had happened, and somewhere just behind my left shoulder, close enough that it was meant for me to hear, a woman whispered with a smile sharp enough to cut. The country girl showed up. I did not turn around. I did not flinch. I had learned a long time ago that reactions are a kind of currency, and I was not about to spend mine on people who thought humiliation was entertainment. Instead, I smoothed my jacket, lifted my chin, and took one more step into the room like I belonged there, because I did, just not in the way any of them understood yet. My name is Maribel Crow. Most of the people in that room knew me only as my brother's older sister, the one from the small town, the one with the unfashionable accent that softened certain vowels, the one whose life they assumed had stalled somewhere between a dirt road and a forgotten past. To them, I was context, not a person. A footnote to the man of the hour, my younger brother Elias, standing near the center of the room in a tailored suit that probably cost more than my first car. The venue was obscene in its beauty, marble floors polished to a mirror shine, chandeliers dripping light like liquid gold, tall windows framing the city skyline as if it had been curated just for this night. Everything about the place said money, taste, and power. Everything about it was meant to make someone like me feel small, and it almost worked. The bride's family had arrived early, of course. They moved through the space like owners, not guests. Her mother evaluated people with a slow, clinical smile. Her father spoke loudly about business and connections, making sure his voice carried. Their friends clustered in silk and linen, sipping champagne they did not pay for, congratulating one another on the inevitable merging of two respectable futures. I caught fragments of conversation as I passed. Such a good match. He is lucky. She elevated him. No one mentioned me by name. I was pointed out instead. A glance, a tilt of the head, a murmur, followed by laughter politely disguised as coughing. I had expected this. I would have been more surprised if they had welcomed me warmly. People like them need contrast. They need someone to look down on so the view from the top feels earned. What they did not know, what not a single one of them suspected, was that I had walked through this lobby hundreds of times before any of them ever set foot in it. I knew the pattern in the marble because I had chosen it. I knew the lighting was slightly warmer near the bar because I had argued for it during renovations. I knew which staff members had been promoted recently and which ones were nervous tonight because they recognized me. But none of that mattered yet. What mattered was my brother. Elias saw me from across the room and froze for just a moment. His smile tightened before he recovered. He crossed the space toward me, stopping short, like he was unsure whether hugging me would cost him something. That hesitation hurt more than the whisper had. I had raised him when our parents could not. I had left opportunities behind so he could chase his. I had built my life quietly so his could look effortless. And tonight, standing under chandeliers that bore my fingerprints in ways no one could see, I understood something with painful clarity. I was not just unwanted here. I was inconvenient. So I smiled, soft, polite, easy to underestimate, because this was only the beginning. Humiliation, I learned that night, does not arrive all at once. It comes in layers, dressed up as politeness, poured slowly like champagne so you barely notice how much you have swallowed until you are dizzy from it. It started with where they put me, not at a table near my brother, not even somewhere neutral. I was seated at the far edge of the ballroom with people who did not know my name and had no interest in learning it. A distant cousin of the bride, a co-worker's spouse, a woman who kept asking me how long I planned to stay in the city, her tone already assuming the answer was not long. I glanced toward the head table and saw an empty chair beside Elias that I knew had been there an hour earlier. Someone had decided I did not belong close enough to be visible. I told myself it did not matter. I told myself I had not come for recognition. Then the comments began. They were subtle at first, wrapped in smiles and tilted heads. How brave of you to come. It must be such a change from where you live. You must feel so out of place here. Each sentence landed lightly enough to deny intent, heavy enough to bruise. When I excused myself to find the restroom, the bride's mother intercepted me near the bar with a hand on my arm that felt more like a grip than a greeting. "You must be so proud," she said, looking me up and down as if checking for stains. "Elias has really risen above his beginnings." Her eyes flicked meaningfully toward me. I smiled because that was what I had learned to do when someone wanted me smaller. I nodded, lowered my gaze, and thanked her for including me. She seemed pleased by that. People like her always are. The speeches were worse. One by one, friends and family stood to toast the happy couple. They praised the bride's elegance, her family's generosity, the opportunities Elias had been given since entering their world. Not once did anyone mention where he came from. Not once did anyone acknowledge the sister who had paid his first application fees, who had driven him to interviews, who had wired money quietly when he was too proud to ask. I watched him laugh along, his hand resting possessively over his fiancée's, and felt something old and sharp settle in my chest. Then came the joke. Someone made a comment about humble roots and how lucky Elias was to have escaped them. Laughter rippled across the room. I felt eyes slide toward me and away again, like people checking a mirror to make sure they looked good while pretending not to care. I laughed too, softly, on cue, because refusing would have marked me as difficult. Inside, I was counting. I counted the server who hesitated when she saw me, recognition flickering across her face before she masked it. I counted the floor manager who straightened his jacket and nodded once, subtly, as he passed. I counted the way the lighting reflected off the walls, exactly as I remembered approving it months earlier. The way the air smelled faintly of citrus and polish, the way the hum of the room carried through the space like a living thing. This hotel was not just familiar to me, it was intimate. Every hallway held a memory. Every doorframe had been argued over. I had walked these corridors when they were nothing but dust and exposed beams. I had signed off on the contracts that made nights like this possible. And still, I said nothing. The bride's mother returned for a second round, emboldened now by wine and applause. She leaned in close, her voice sweet enough to pass as concern. "You must understand," she murmured. "We are very particular about the image surrounding this family. I hope you will not take that personally." I met her eyes and smiled again. What she did not know was that long before this engagement, long before the seating charts and speeches, papers had been signed, decisions had been finalized. Names were already inked into places no apology could erase. The walls around us were standing on agreements older than her assumptions. But silence has weight when you let it sit long enough. It presses back. It makes people careless. So I stayed quiet, I drank my water, I listened, and I waited, letting them believe the story they had written for me, because the longer they enjoyed it, the harder the ending would land. I noticed the change in my brother before anyone said my name out loud again. It was in the way he stopped looking for me in the room, the way his eyes skimmed past me like I was part of the decor. Elias had always been expressive, unable to hide what he felt, even when he tried. That night, he learned how. He learned how to smile without warmth, how to nod without listening, how to stand beside people who praised him for things they had not built and thank them like they had saved his life. I watched him accept compliments that erased me. Every time someone mentioned how fortunate he was to be welcomed into such a powerful family, he agreed. He said things like, "I would not be here without them," and "they showed me what was possible." He said it loudly, confidently, like repetition might make it truer. Each word landed like a small betrayal, not dramatic enough to call out, not quiet enough to ignore. I remembered the nights he slept on my couch because he could not afford rent. I remembered the calls at midnight when he was ready to quit, and I talked him through another week. None of that fit into the story he was telling now. He did not come to my table once, not even to ask if I was enjoying myself, not even to check if I needed anything. When I finally stood and crossed the room to congratulate him properly, he stiffened like someone bracing for embarrassment. His fiancée stayed glued to his side, her hand tightening around his arm, as if she was afraid I might pull him back into something she could not control. "Thank you for coming," he said, too formally, already glancing past me. I told him I was proud of him. He nodded, distracted, and turned back to a conversation about investment portfolios that did not include him yet, but soon would. I stepped away feeling like I had just said goodbye to someone who was still breathing. It hurt more than I expected. There was a time when it had only been the two of us against everything else, when our world was small and loud and uncertain, and we survived by leaning into each other. I had taken the harder road so he could take the easier one later. I had never regretted it. Until that night. Watching him trade memory for approval made me feel foolish in a way I had not felt in years. The confrontation came wrapped in charm. The bride decided it was time for a family photo. She announced it sweetly, her voice carrying just enough to draw attention. "Immediate family only," she clarified, her eyes flicking to me for a fraction of a second too long. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Someone laughed like it was nothing. I stood there, unsure whether to move forward or step back, the pause stretching just long enough to sting. She smiled apologetically. "Oh, I just assumed you would not want to be in this one. It is more of a legacy thing." Legacy. The word echoed louder than it should have. I felt the room lean in, waiting to see what I would do. This was the moment they expected me to shrink, to make things easier by removing myself. I almost did. My legs actually shifted backward before I stopped them. Leaving would have spared me the embarrassment. Leaving would have given them the ending they wanted. Instead, I stayed where I was. "I do not mind," I said calmly. "I am family too." There it was, the flicker of irritation in her eyes, the quick glance toward her mother. Elias hesitated, caught between habit and comfort, then chose comfort. He did not correct her. He did not insist. He let the photographer gesture me aside like an afterthought. That was the moment something settled inside me. Patience is not passive, it is expensive. Every second I stayed silent, every smile I forced, cost me something real. My throat burned, my chest felt tight, but I paid the price willingly because I understood what they did not. Striking back too early would have robbed this night of its weight. So I stepped aside, I folded my hands, I became small in all the ways they needed me to be. And while the camera flashed and immortalized a version of my brother that no longer included me, I promised myself I would not chase him. I would let him walk where he thought power lived. Some lessons required distance. The pressure built until it felt unbearable. I held it anyway. Once you stop waiting for kindness, you start noticing truth. It began with small things most people would miss. A server who lingered a second too long when I asked for water, her eyes flicking to my face with something like recognition before she caught herself. A bartender who addressed me as ma'am with a respect he had not used earlier, then quickly corrected his tone when he noticed who I was sitting near. Staff do not behave that way unless they have been told something or unless they remember something. Managers were worse. I saw it when the bride's father snapped his fingers for the floor manager and pointed at me, his mouth forming the word remove. The manager approached my table, stopped, then hesitated. He glanced past me toward the corridor that led to the administrative offices. His jaw tightened. He cleared his throat and said he would be right back. He never returned. Instead, another manager appeared. Younger, nervous, overly polite. He asked if everything was to my liking. When I thanked him and said yes, he looked relieved in a way that had nothing to do with service standards. That was when I knew the undercurrent had shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically. Quietly, the way real power always moves. The confirmation came by accident, which is how the most honest truths usually do. The bride's aunt complained loudly about an incorrect charge on her room folio, waving the bill like proof of betrayal. She demanded someone important fix it. The front desk clerk apologized and explained the rate was correct according to the contract on file. Contract was the word that made me look up. The bride's father strode over, puffed with confidence, and announced that he would handle it himself. He dropped a name, then another, both meant to intimidate. He said he knew the owner. He said mistakes like this did not happen to families like theirs. The clerk nodded, calm, and asked him to wait while she verified something in the system. She did not look at him when she said it. She looked at me. That was the moment my restraint changed shape. Up until then, it had been endurance. Something I carried because leaving would have hurt more. Standing there, watching a man boast about influence he did not possess, something inside me settled into place. This was no longer about surviving the night. This was about ending it properly. Tonight, I decided. Not tomorrow, when apologies could be drafted and stories softened. Not later, when memory might blur the edges. Tonight, while witnesses were still holding champagne glasses and assumptions. Tonight, while arrogance was still loud enough to trip over itself. I did not act immediately. Power reveals itself best when given room. I moved through the room slowly, noticing how conversations dipped when I passed, how laughter grew sharper. The bride's mother watched me openly now, suspicion creeping into her expression like a crack in porcelain. The father continued to perform, unaware that borrowed wealth always collapses fastest under scrutiny. Their confidence was unsecured, propped up by favors and leases and appearances that could be revoked with a signature. I gave them one last chance without announcing it. The bride took the microphone again, flushed with wine and approval. She thanked her parents for making everything possible, thanked their friends for their support, thanked my brother for choosing her world. Then she paused, smiled sweetly, and gestured vaguely in my direction. Some people, she said lightly, struggle to let go of where they come from. but tonight is about moving forward, not backward. Laughter followed. Not everyone joined in, but enough did. I felt the insult land cleanly, without disguise. It was public. It was deliberate. It was meant to remind me that silence had been mistaken for submission. I nodded once, as if accepting the truth of it. That nod was my last gift to them. Across the room, the floor manager met my eyes. Just briefly. Just enough. He gave the smallest possible shake of his head, a warning disguised as courtesy. I smiled back, calm and grateful. He exhaled, like someone who had been waiting for permission. The air in the ballroom felt tighter now, charged with something the guests could not name. They sensed a shift, but did not understand it. People rarely do until it is too late. My brother stood beside his fiancée, laughing a beat too loudly, unaware that the ground under his feet was no longer solid. I walked toward the center of the room, my steps measured, my expression unreadable. Conversations stuttered and stopped as I passed. The chandeliers above us glowed warmly, indifferent witnesses to what was about to end. They thought the story was still theirs to tell. They were wrong. I did not raise my voice. I did not ask for attention. I waited until the laughter thinned and the last toast dissolved into polite applause. Then I stepped forward just enough that the microphone caught my breath before my words. The room leaned toward me without realizing it was doing so. I own the hotel. For a moment, nothing happened. Silence spread outward like a held breath, heavy and confused. The bride's smile froze, uncertain whether this was a joke she had not been invited to laugh at yet. Her father's brow furrowed, as if he were translating a foreign language. My brother stared at me, open-mouthed, searching my face for the sister he thought he knew. Then the room fractured. Someone laughed too loudly. Someone else said, "That's not funny." The floor manager stepped forward before anyone could recover and asked if I would like to move this conversation somewhere quieter. I shook my head. Quiet was no longer necessary. 2 staff members appeared beside him, tablets already in hand. The front desk phones began ringing all at once. Contracts came out first, as they always do. Calm hands placed folders on a nearby table, pages marked and highlighted. The bride's father demanded explanations, names, numbers. He was given all 3. His voice rose as the answers did not bend. He tried to call someone important. The call went unanswered. He tried another. That one rang and rang while his daughter watched her future fold in on itself. Accounts were frozen without ceremony. A few keystrokes, a nod, and the champagne stopped flowing. The band was asked to take a break. Guests were informed, gently but firmly, that certain rooms were no longer available. Luggage would be brought down. Transportation could be arranged. Apologies were offered to the wrong people. Staff no longer looked at the bride's family for instruction. They looked at me. The mother reached for my arm with the same grip she had used earlier, but this time it trembled. She said my name like it was a mistake she wanted to undo. I stepped back, not unkindly, just finished. There was nothing left to say that would improve her situation. The engagement did not end with shouting. It ended with understanding, the kind that arrives too late to fix anything, the kind that settles into bones and stays there. My brother finally looked at me without filters or borrowed confidence. He saw the rooms, the staff, the documents, the quiet authority he had mistaken for insignificance. He tried to speak. I did not stay long enough to hear it. I walked through the ballroom toward the exit, my heels steady against the marble I had chosen myself. Behind me, voices overlapped, accusations flew, alliances dissolved. People who had laughed earlier now avoided eye contact, desperate to distance themselves from the spectacle. The chandeliers continued to glow, unchanged, as if to remind everyone that buildings outlast egos. Outside, the night air felt cool and clean. The city hummed, indifferent to the collapse it had just hosted. I did not feel victorious. I felt complete. There is a difference. Victory seeks witnesses. Completion does not. I did not look back. Later, alone, I thought about how easily people confuse silence with weakness, how quickly they mock what they do not understand. Betrayal always underestimates memory. It forgets that people who build quietly tend to document everything. Arrogance always ignores paper trails, assuming confidence can substitute for ownership. It cannot. I did not destroy them out of anger. I ended the story because it was finished. There was no sequel hidden in the wreckage, no redemption arc waiting to be unlocked, just consequences meeting assumptions in a room full of mirrors. This story ends here, but the pattern does not. There will always be another gathering, another whisper meant to shrink someone who chose patience over performance. Somewhere, another reckoning is already waiting, calm and prepared, holding its truth until the moment it needs to be spoken.